A few months after the divorce, my ex texted, "We need to talk. Urgent." I wrote back, "Not anymore. I, 34 am, work as a project manager for a construction company. I got divorced a little over a year ago after a 6-year marriage. No kids, just a house, 2 cars, and a dog she kept. The divorce wasn't dramatic at first. It was mostly paperwork, mediation that went nowhere, and eventually a judge signing off on our marital settlement agreement. We sold the house. After paying off the mortgage and fees, we split the net proceeds 50/50. Retirement accounts were divided with a QDRO. No alimony either way. Clean break. At least that's what I thought. For timeline clarity, we physically separated in October. I moved into an apartment, and we had 0 physical contact after that. The divorce was finalized in June of the following year. That's important. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, in mid-September, my phone buzzed at night. "Her, we need to talk. Urgent." We hadn't spoken since closing on the house. I kept one communication channel open because my attorney advised in case anything official came up. I replied, "Not anymore. I'm done." She responded immediately, "This isn't about us. It's serious." I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, "I'm pregnant." I just stared at the screen. We had been physically separated for 11 months at that point. 0 contact. The last time I'd even been inside the house was in March, during the divorce process, to grab tools from the garage. Her sister was there the entire time. It was a quick in and out in broad daylight. I texted back, "Due date?" She said, "Late January." Mid-September to late January is about 4 months. Conception would have been around late April. We were not together in April. We hadn't been together since the previous October. I wrote, "That's not possible." She called immediately. I answered, "Why are you acting like this?" She said, already defensive. "Because we haven't been together in almost a year." I said, "We were separated long before April." "You don't remember everything," she said. "I remember enough." Then she shifted tone. "Legally, if a child is born within 300 days of divorce, the ex-husband is presumed to be the father. You know that, right?" I didn't actually know the number off the top of my head, but she was correct. In our state, there's a 300-day presumption of paternity after divorce. Late January would fall within 300 days of our June divorce. "You're not seriously trying to put this on me," I said. "I'm not putting anything on you. I'm stating facts. If you don't cooperate, I'll file to establish paternity and child support. The court will assume you're the father unless you challenge it." There it was. Not fear, not confusion. Strategy. I said, "File it. I'll request a DNA test." "You think that won't cost you?" She shot back. "You think dragging this through court won't hurt?" I said, "I'll see you in court," and hung up. 2 weeks later, I was served with a petition to establish paternity and for child support. She listed me as a presumed father under the 300-day rule and claimed we had continued an intimate relationship after separation. That was a flat lie. I rehired my divorce attorney. He read the petition and said, "This is straightforward. We file a response denying paternity and request genetic testing under the family code. The presumption is rebuttable." At the initial hearing, the judge ordered genetic testing through a certified lab and set a deadline. No temporary child support was ordered at that time because paternity was contested. Outside the courtroom, she tried to guilt me. "You're humiliating me," she said. "I'm asking for proof." I said, "You know it's yours." "No," I said calmly. "I know it's not." Testing was done within 2 weeks. Standard cheek swabs. Results took about 3 weeks. The waiting didn't stress me because I knew the timeline, but I was irritated that I even had to do this. My attorney called with the results. 0% probability of paternity. He filed the results with the court and requested dismissal of the petition and a formal order rebutting the presumption. That should have been the end. It wasn't. Before the court entered the final dismissal order, she filed an additional request for temporary child support, claiming urgent financial need. She tried to push through a wage withholding order based on the existing presumption, even though the DNA results had already come back and were filed. HR emailed me saying they had received paperwork related to income withholding. I forwarded everything to my attorney immediately. He filed an emergency motion to stay enforcement and attached the certified DNA results. At the hearing, the judge reviewed the lab report. "Have you reviewed these results?" the judge asked her. "Yes," she said quietly. "And you proceeded to request wage withholding anyway?" She didn't have a good answer. The judge dismissed the paternity petition with prejudice, vacated any temporary enforcement actions, and ordered her to pay my attorney's fees related to the improper enforcement attempt. Outside the courtroom, she was furious. "You think you won?" she said. "This isn't about winning." I replied, "You embarrass me. You filed the petition." She said, "You owe me after everything." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about a child. It wasn't even really about money in that moment. It was about control and resentment. For context, we separated after I discovered she'd been having an affair. I found messages and financial transfers that didn't make sense. She denied it first, then admitted to an emotional connection. Then later I found proof it wasn't just emotional. That's when I filed for divorce. During the divorce, I pushed for a clean split. I didn't dig too deep into some questionable financial stuff because I wanted it over. Now I reconsidered that decision. Our settlement agreement required full financial disclosure from both of us. If either party had concealed material assets, the court could reopen property division based on fraud or misrepresentation. I asked my attorney to look into certain transfers I'd always suspected but hadn't pursued. We subpoenaed bank records tied to an account she had listed as part of her small business venture during the marriage. I'd assumed it was just a hobby that failed. The records told a different story. Over the last year of our marriage, before separation, there were multiple transfers totaling around $48,000 moved from joint funds into an account solely in her name. That account was not fully disclosed in the divorce financial affidavits. From there, money was withdrawn or transferred to an individual whose last name matched the guy she'd been seeing. The timing overlapped with when she told me she was working late and trying to save the business. We filed a motion to reopen the property division based on non-disclosure of marital assets. Her attorney called mine asking if we could resolve this amicably. At that point, I was done being the reasonable one. In court, the documentation was clear. Bank statements, transfer records, and the sworn financial disclosure forms she had signed under penalty of perjury. The judge didn't look happy. "Full financial disclosure is mandatory in dissolution proceedings," the judge said. "Failure to disclose material assets constitutes misrepresentation." The court ordered her to reimburse me for my half of the undisclosed funds, plus my attorney's fees for bringing the motion. Between the principal amount and fees, the judgment was just over $30,000. She didn't have the money to pay in one lump sum, so we recorded the judgment. That creates a lien on real property and allows for enforcement actions. She didn't own real estate at that point, but she had stable employment. We initiated wage garnishment consistent with state law limits. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had tried to garnish my wages for child support based on a false claim. Now her wages were being garnished to satisfy a fraud judgment. She called me after she received notice. "You're trying to destroy me," she said. "I'm enforcing a court order." I said, "You could have let this go. You could have disclosed the account." "You're suing a pregnant woman," she said. "I'm holding someone accountable for lying in a legal proceeding," I said. Eventually, the biological father of the child was legally established through a separate paternity action she filed against him. I know this because mutual acquaintances mentioned it. That situation was between them. I stayed out of it. Over time, her wages were garnished monthly to satisfy the judgment. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady. There was no big cinematic moment. No shouting. Just paperwork, court dates, and enforcement mechanisms that exist for a reason. Looking back, the biggest lesson for me was this. Try to keep the peace by overlooking financial dishonesty during divorce almost cost me much more later. If I hadn't challenged the paternity presumption immediately, I could have been tied up in years of litigation and potential support obligations while sorting it out. The 300-day presumption sounds scary when someone throws it at you like a threat, but it's rebuttable. The law allows for genetic testing. You just have to act quickly and not panic. I don't feel victorious. I feel relieved. She wanted urgency and leverage. What she got was due process. If there's any takeaway here, it's document everything. Don't ignore red flags just to get out faster. And never assume someone won't push boundaries further if pushing worked before. That urgent text changed nothing about who I am. It just reminded me that boundaries aren't mean. They're necessary. If you want more stories where paperwork ends up being the real plot twist, stick around. Apparently my life runs on court filings and certified mail now.